Customer obsession, eager adoption of external trends, and high-velocity decision-making. These are just three of the things that Jeff Bezos and his company Amazon focus on in order to be successful. My guest today is Steve Anderton. He is the author of the Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon. It is a Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and international bestseller. Steve and I have a terrific conversation about a number of the principles that drive Bezos's success and the success of Amazon. Me personally, I'm thankful for that success. I've got some bunk beds arriving for my kids here in the next few hours, and my oldest son is going to be putting them together for me. Enjoy my interview with Steve. Make sure that you take careful note of how to maintain a day one attitude in your business, to stay on the front foot, to not get stagnant, to not get complacent. This is fundamental to your business's success. My name is Eric Anderton. I appreciate you listening to Construction Genius here today. Feel free to give us a review or a rating wherever you get your podcasts. Enjoy my discussion with Steve. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Steve, welcome to Construction Genius.
Eric, thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
I have a question. What can commercial contractors learn from a book nerd?
Well, that book nerd I think you're referring to is Jeff Bezos, the founder, CEO of Amazon.
Yep.
And, I think when people hear Amazon or trying to compare to Amazon, they think, well, I don't sell product online. I don't sell books online. And fortunately, Bezos really did lay out his plan for growing Amazon. And I think we have to agree, Amazon's been pretty successful.
Yep.
But his plan for growing Amazon in his annual letters to shareholders.
Okay.
So I looked at all of those letters, read them, dissected them, and came up with 14 principles that I believe Amazon has used to grow that apply to any business, actually nonprofit, various types of organizations.
Okay.
And so I think you need to not think of it as just, an online retailer, a purveyor of books, but what principles did he use starting from nothing? He did like everybody else.
Yep.
People forget he was on his hands and knees in 1994 putting books in packages and driving them to the post office. So he started small. What was it that helped him, allowed him, that he used the tools, techniques, mindsets to get Amazon to where it is today, one of the 5 most valuable companies in the world?
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I got bunk beds coming today from Amazon. I've had computer parts. My kid is building his first computer, so he's had computer parts come in. So obviously Amazon is way more than just books. You lay these principles out here in your book, The Bezos Letters. And one of them that really struck my attention here is this idea of practicing dynamic invention and innovation.
Yeah.
Construction is, on the one hand, it's sort of doesn't have a reputation for innovation, but on the other, I see a lot of construction companies looking to use technology and various processes to improve the way they build projects. Give us a little bit of detail here on this idea of dynamic invention and innovation.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And the wording of that principle is actually very specific.
Mm-hmm.
In the terms of invention comes before innovation.
Interesting.
And so, most business, if you read articles about business, they talk about needing to be innovative. We need to have a chief innovation officer. We need to innovate our products and services. Amazon doesn't think that way. Amazon actually starts with experimentation. And the experimentation leads to invention, which allows them to innovate. And I would say, the construction industry has all kinds of opportunities to invent new ways, right? New processes, new mechanisms for building, for getting material in different places. The one I can think of immediately now is using drones for recording, right? Construction progress, et cetera, versus again, the old way of
Yep.
cameras and video and right, all of those kinds of things, being able to get in different places than they were ever able to do before.
So let me
And
ask
so
you, what's the distinction between invention and innovation? What's the difference there?
I'll use an example, the Kindle, right? The ebook reader, developed in 2005, 2006, released in 2007. As Bezos describes it, we had the audacious goal of reinventing the book,
Right.
something that has been around for 500 years.
Yes.
And so again, reinventing the book, not innovating on the book.
Right.
And so the Kindle, right, a electronic reader, it had to do more than what a book can do. And he describes, and again, his 2007 letter, that with the Kindle, they realized that the best experience with a book is when the book fades away and you're just in the story. And so with the e-reader, they spent a lot of time engineering, inventing e-ink and right, all kinds of things to make that book experience as simple as possible, even to the point of creating a whole new type of technology called Whisper Sync.
Mhm.
That's the technology that I don't even hardly think about anymore, but allows me to read a Kindle book on my iPad and then go to my actual Kindle device and sync up to the exact spot I stopped reading on my iPad. Well, technologically, that's extremely difficult
Right.
because my Kindle could be idle for weeks, and the servers, right, the service has to actually know the state of the Kindle, the state of the book where I read last, and be able to sync those up together for, again, a seamless experience for reading.
So in
So
your, what I'm interested in here though, just that statement to reinvent the book, what does that tell us about the personality of Jeff Bezos as a leader, do you think?
that the first thing that comes to mind is that he embraces experimentation and realizes that means failure absolutely is an option. And in fact, what he says is an experiment, you don't know whether it's going to work or not. If you did, it's not an experiment.
Right.
And so this idea of failure, my first principle is called encourage successful failure.
Yes.
Well, and he does that. So experimenting at Amazon, getting it wrong and learning from it is actually a virtue,
Right.
not a negative, right? Too many businesses say, we want you to innovate, but you better be right.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that employees especially actually don't fear failure, because we all know we learn when we fail, we figure out what went wrong, we try it again. I have 7 grandchildren under the age of 7. Just watching them learn to walk, right? We understand that. But what people are afraid of are the consequences of failure.
Yes. So
When a
let's talk about that. What I'm interested though, a couple of different things. Bezos has a certain reputation as a, I could use pretty strong language here, but he's a very intense individual. And also, the reason I asked you about this idea of reinventing the book, that seems like quite an ambitious goal. So
yes,
deeply ambitious, deeply driven, deeply intense, and yet this idea of failure is okay. How does that all work in the balance of the way Amazon is run?
well, I think that you have to understand that the core where Amazon starts with everything they do is with the customer.
Right.
Is it better for the customer? And sometimes it may be better for the customer and maybe in the short term, not better for Amazon. Amazon Prime
Right.
first came out, free shipping, right? First came out in early 2000s. The entire management team told Bezos, we can't do this. We can't afford it. We're going to lose our shirts. What he said was that's a friction point for customers, right? You get to the cart, you have all your pieces in it. All of a sudden now you have this $25 shipping or whatever it was. And it was like, now I have to decide again. And he said, if we take that friction away, it's better for the customer and ultimately will be better for Amazon and our shareholders.
Hold on. I just have to stop you before you go further, because the way that Amazon is set up and the way that they have not manipulated, but run their business in terms of how they make money or the way they make money and the way they report it and all those kinds of things, it seems untraditional in many ways. Is that an accurate description?
Correct. What I say about Bezos is he's unconventional in his business mindset and decisions.
Yes.
And so he doesn't rely just on what's always been done. Again, another great example of that is Amazon didn't make a profit for probably their first 10 years.
Yes.
He almost single-handedly said to Wall Street, I don't know if he converted them or not, but said to Wall Street, we are making decisions for the long term, not short-term, Wall Street earnings reports. And he was willing to stay the course. In fact, all kinds of stuff in the early 2000s, especially after the dot-com bust, if you remember all of that, Amazon .bomb, Amazon can't survive. And he had this long-term thinking in his mind was right, which he has proven now, again, many years later, that absolutely he was right.
So it's interesting. Going back to this idea of practice, dynamic, invention, and innovation. Tell us something about that word practice and why you use that word specifically with regards to Amazon.
Well, it really goes back to the culture at Amazon. Amazon really doesn't have an R&D department. They have a hardware development kind of piece. Mm-hmm. That's where the Kindle came out of. That's actually where the Fire phone, the Amazon phone came out of, which is an utter abysmal failure. Yep. But that's also where Echo and then Alexa came out of again. But every employee at Amazon is encouraged to experiment in their own particular piece of what they do at Amazon. Is there a better process? Is there a better sales script to use? Is there a better, way to look at how the website is designed? And any individual can bring an idea to initially their team, and kind of up the ladder. That's dynamic. That's not relying on a small group of people to go, oh, we think this is a good idea, but it's coming from the culture itself so that everybody's thinking about how to do it better for the customer.
How long does it take for an idea to go from, a seed form? How quickly can it get up that chain of command in Amazon? Are there open lines of communication? Does it get stuck in the bureaucracy?
No, there are open. That's, again, very counterintuitive. So literally, it's hard to explain to somebody who's used to normal corporate America, right. But literally a line employee can pitch an idea. And if the supervisor thinks it's a good idea, they don't take the idea and do something with it. They take the employee and move them up the chain. And the layers of management are surprisingly small given the size of the company and the number of employees.
Interesting. How does Amazon balance this idea of invention and innovation? You have another principle there of bet on big ideas. How do they balance that with the risks inherent in being in business?
And that really, I'm glad you asked that question, because that really is the core of my book. I call Jeff Bezos the master of risk because of how he thinks about failure and using experimentation and failure strategically to grow. The whole idea, bet on big ideas. I mean, he describes several big ideas at Amazon. Amazon Prime is one of them, free shipping. Amazon Marketplace is another one. Again, very interesting. So again, when nobody thought this was a good idea, Bezos allowed independent third-party sellers to put their product literally next to an Amazon sold product. That started small. A couple failures, by the way, to get to where the marketplace became a viable option. In 2018, he said 58% of all products sold on the Amazon website are sold by third-party sellers. I'm sure it's higher now. Most of the products that Amazon sells actually are from third-party small business owners. So again, Amazon has this reputation, right, of putting businesses out of business, certainly retail disrupting, or right, all kinds of things. Really, to go back to that dynamic invention and innovation, invention, I said, leads to innovation, and invention is where disruption occurs, not innovation. So a byproduct of inventing something new is, quote, the disruption. With retail, Bezos saw early on that the internet was going to allow a very different way to sell products online. He invented all kinds of different ways to take advantage of that. That led to disruption. But Amazon, I'm convinced, I may be wrong, but Amazon never seeks specifically to disrupt any industry. They seek to make it better for customers. And disruption is the byproduct often of their invention.
Interesting. How do you think Amazon, so construction to a great extent is a sort of a community game, right? You've got partners that help you to build a project, or you're a partner helping a larger contract to build. Again, Amazon has this reputation, maybe I'm overstating it, but the reputation of being, like you said, putting other people out of business. How does Amazon position itself in the world of business in order to cultivate relationships with the partners that they do business with?
Yeah, and they're getting a lot of pushback now. I'm sure you've seen with those third-party sellers, the marketplace sellers. Are they taking their sales data and then creating, Amazon products, private label products to undercut them?
Right? Wasn't that in the Wall Street Journal?
Wall Street Journal and few others. And really the antitrust discussion around Amazon is really focusing on that. It's kind of two sides here. One is Amazon has literally created a place for hundreds of thousands of businesses to be in business.
Right.
By utilizing their platform. Now, what's smart, Amazon charges them for that.
Right.
So they have another revenue stream coming in. It may be true. I don't know. But it seems hard for me to understand why Amazon would poach that. Margins on those products are so small versus what they could make helping and supporting those small businesses. So that piece of it, I just haven't reconciled, in my mind. I think the other thing that Amazon gets pushback on is their treatment of workers. And really, to be specific, it really is the fulfillment center workers that people are focused on.
Yeah.
Warehouse workers. And I've had the opportunity to tour two different Amazon fulfillment centers, and it's absolutely astounding, that operation. And it's a really hard place to work.
Yeah.
Again, here's where customer obsession, right? 3 customer pillars at Amazon: wide selection, low prices, fast delivery. Well, fast delivery has consequences, which is if I click on order now and I want it tomorrow morning, or I want it tonight, there's somebody who has to go pick that product, put it in a box, get it on some truck or transportation to get to me, and need to do it as fast as absolutely possible. That creates an environment that it's hard. And Amazon and Bezos and senior leaders there actually don't shy away.
No.
Here's the phrase they use. And I heard this from a senior VP in Nashville, where I went to a recruiting event because Amazon's actually building out a new 5,000 employee center of excellence here in Nashville. That was announced during that headquarters search that, kind of got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, right.
But the question was asked, and they bust in college kids and they're looking for people. And a question was asked in open Q&A. Amazon has a reputation for being a hard place to work at. And this senior VP, David Clark, looked up and said, "It is," and just paused. And he said, "We're building something great here. And to do that, it takes a certain kind of person who's willing to put in that kind of work."
And so I think the important lesson here is, and I always talk to my clients about this, is you must understand your culture and you must articulate it, and then allow people to either be attracted by that or repelled by it.
Or not, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and if you're obviously working within the realms of ethical business, you can choose whatever culture you want. And if it's a hard driving, difficult culture, be straight up with people on that, because it does attract certain people.
Correct. Exactly. And it doesn't attract others.
Yes.
And I want to say, certainly for fulfillment center workers, Amazon has a number of programs available to them for free, training in areas where they could move out of the warehouse into other jobs, like programming and, logistics and some things like that. They spend millions of dollars on training for those people who are willing to accept it and want to do something different.
Excellent. Let's look at another principle here, principle 7 in your book, and that's generate high velocity decisions. What does Amazon do to generate those high velocity decisions? And tell me what you mean by that.
So it really kind of goes back to what we talked a little bit about dynamic invention and innovation and how things move. I think we know, Eric, that at a lot of companies, there are many layers of approval needed to do anything. And Amazon, Bezos has set up this structure of what he calls type 1 and type 2 decisions. So a type 1 decision is a very big bet the farm, hard to reverse decision. Probably choosing that second headquarters in outside Washington, D.C. was a type 1 decision made with lots of data, lots of time, lots of thought and discussion because it's so hard to reverse.
Absolutely.
Type 2 decisions are the opposite, really. They are decisions that you can make and the consequences of the decision are small. And if you decide, gosh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, you can easily, as he describes it, turn around and go back through that door. Without much consequence. He said the problem with many companies, especially as they grow, is they take type 2 decisions and move it into a type 1 process. And when you do that, you slow down growth, right? Because you can't get things moving as fast. One of the questions I had originally and really looking at this was, how in the world does Amazon continue to invent like they have? Meaning AWS, Amazon Web Services, cloud computing, meaning Prime, meaning Marketplace, meaning Echo, meaning now retail stores, right? A whole new idea around shopping at a grocery store by getting rid of the checkout. How do they do that? It's because of the practice of dynamic invention and innovation, but also because they default to action. So their decision process, they understand we absolutely could make a wrong decision here, but the consequences aren't that bad. We can correct it quickly once we recognize that.
And so then how does that relate to the 10th principle you have here, which is promote ownership? Is there a relationship there?
There is. And actually, Bezos talks about it in the, I can't remember what year now, actually, I think 2006 letter, where he opens the letter describing a friend of his that had a rental property and the tenants nailed their Christmas tree to the hardwood floors. And he said, tenants think different than owners, meaning an owner, I'd never do that in my house with hardwood floors, right? I'd get the stand, I'd do, but a tenant, it's like, I don't care. And so what he said, and he actually said this in the 97 letter, start right off. He said, a key to our success is going to be the employees that we hire. And in order for us to grow and be successful, we need employees that think like owners. Therefore, they actually need to be owners. Now, what that translated into is a very generous stock option program. And in fact, Amazon pays great wages, but they don't pay top tier wages. But they do have a great stock option program so that every employee knows what I'm doing here, those maybe extra hours on the weekend will help Amazon grow and therefore will benefit me in the long term. And there have been now many employees that have become millionaires because of that stock option program.
Absolutely. Principle 6 here, it's got a buzzword in there. So I need a little bit of help with this. It's understand your flywheel. Tell me what you mean by the flywheel.
In summer of 2001, Jim Collins, author of the book Good to Great, where the flywheel concept at least became popular in chapter 8 called The Flywheel and the Doom Loop. This was actually 3 months before that book was published, was invited by Bezos to a one-day retreat with the senior leadership team. And Collins spent the whole day talking about the flywheel. And that senior leadership team came out of that meeting with a sketch of Amazon's flywheel. In fact, it's in the book and you can still go to Amazon website and see that sketch. At the center, let me pause. The whole concept of a flywheel, huge, big, heavy, hard to get moving, right? You see it on machines all the time, but hard to get moving. But once it gets started and you keep pushing on it, it keeps rotating. So what's Amazon's flywheel? Well, at the center of that is growth. That was one of their core values, one of their core things they knew they needed. But in order to grow, they had stuff they pushed on in the flywheel to keep that growth going.
Right.
One of those is more customers. Well, how do you get more customers? Well, you have a very easy to use website. And so they've spent billions of dollars making their website the easiest frictionless way to shop online.
Right.
And they've done that for years. More customers brings more sales. Another piece that allows Amazon more negotiating power with manufacturers' products so they can lower prices, which brings more customers. And word of mouth, easy to use, low prices, more customers allow better negotiation. And then they actually added an addendum for marketplace. Now we have third-party sellers, so there is a wider there's an example of it.
Yep.
A wider input of new customers. And all of that, if you look at Amazon today, they are still maximizing this flywheel.
So their flywheel is customer experience, traffic, sellers, selection, lower cost structure, and then lower prices.
Correct.
And the idea of it is to identify those particular push points that drive your business forward. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the key here is executing on all of those well.
Okay.
Right? Because, if one piece of that flywheel doesn't work right, the whole thing suffers. It's off balance. It's not going to give you that momentum that you need moving forward.
Excellent. So then in order for you to be able to execute that part of the Amazon thinking, understanding your flywheel, I think the key word there is understand. You have to be able to sit down with your company and your senior leaders. Maybe you do need some outside help. And I know that's why folks bring me in to work with their construction companies, is because I'm a sounding board to help them with that outside help to understand something like, what is our flywheel? What drives our success?
What drives your success? Exactly. And understanding is the first part, and then flawless execution is the second part.
Yeah. So it's one thing to understand, it's another to execute.
Correct.
So with that idea of execution in mind, the 13th principle is measure what matters, question what's measured, and trust your gut. Tell me something about measuring what matters. How do you know what matters?
Well, you have to determine where your key indicators are. So again, dashboard idea, lots of different ways of describing what that is. I think the key point here is Amazon absolutely is a huge data-driven company. Uh-huh. They rarely make decisions without data to back up that decision.
Okay.
But that's not all they do.
Right.
The wording may be a little cumbersome, but it is measure what matters. So data and analytics is really important, but question what's measured. And there was an example Bezos talked about a product manager that the numbers said everything was working great, but the sales weren't where they expected them to be.
Right.
And what that product manager ultimately realized, because she questioned that number that was driving, was that they actually were measuring an incorrect data point, which led to a misalignment with the ultimate analytics. So measure what matters, but question what's measured, and then ultimately trust your gut. And I'll go back to Prime or Marketplace or AWS, meaning everybody in leadership at Amazon thought those were terrible ideas.
Right.
And Bezos pushed them through because he trusted his gut that he said, I think this is going to work. It might not. And if it's not, again, back to that decision velocity, right? Then we'll change. But let's try it and see.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then final principle in your book, the principle 14, believe it's always day one. What does that mean?
That is such a core concept at Amazon. It's included in the very first letter in some form or fashion in every letter sense, that Bezos basically has some form of saying at the end of each letter. In 2015, I'm just looking at, our approach remains the same. It's still day one. And so it's a concept, not a date. Day one means the first day you were open for business, the first time as a contractor you got a job and you went to that job site.
Yep.
The excitement, the knowing we had to take care of customers, all the things that you knew had to work well on that first day. What Bezos has built, I would say, in the culture at Amazon is always thinking like a startup.
Yeah.
And in fact, I read recently an article and it was really questioning that startup idea or mentality for a company that's as big as Amazon, that maybe that's what's gotten them into some of the antitrust trouble and some of those kinds of things, right? That they don't think like a normal company.
Right.
But to explain kind of what Bezos' mindset is there, I want to go to the 2016 letter where he writes about this in quite a bit of detail. I'll give a little bit. He was asked in an all-hands meeting, right, where he gets up on stage and just answers questions from employees. The question was, Jeff, what does day 2 look like?
Interesting.
Yeah, actually, there's a recording on YouTube of him answering. He kind of chuckles and he said, I've thought a bit about this. And I want to quote just a couple sentences here. He answers the question by saying, day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that's why it's always day 1. Now, he goes on to say, for businesses, that could take 20 years.
Right.
But once you miss that startup excitement, that idea of coming into business and doing your best, ultimately that business will fail. Now, he says, what interested him more was how do you, as a large company, as Amazon is, how do we fend off that day 2? And he talks about 4 items, what he calls a starter pack of day 2 or day 1 defense. And the 4 are customer obsession, touched on that a little bit, a skeptical view of proxies, meaning proxies for Bezos are procedures that are followed blindly.
Right.
That may not serve the customer. And I think we've all had experiences with somebody saying, that's not company policy, or I can't do that. And he says you need them, but you have a skeptical view of them.
Hold on. Specifically, beware of those proxies that may not serve the customer.
The customer.
Yes.
And that, again, ties into that customer obsession, piece there.
Yep.
Number 3, eager adoption of external trends.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this last year in 2020, we had lots of trends that were accelerated. And instead of fighting them, eagerly adopting those trends and figuring out what does that mean for us going into the future. And then number 4, which we talked about, high velocity decision making. Those are what he says are a starter pack of day 1 defense.
I like that. And again, the high velocity decision making is distinguishing between the type 1 and type 2 decisions.
Correct.
As we're wrapping up here, Steve, what can we learn from Jeff Bezos about leading a company?
What comes to mind is the culture, and he would say, not that you build, but that is part of your company that you influence.
Right.
And he says, culture, every company has a culture.
Yes, it does.
And being intentional about that culture. And there are a couple things that Bezos does and has done for years that helps build in that, high standard employees, right? All of that kind of stuff. One is early on, Bezos was complaining about his knees hurting as they were packing books. And he said, we need to get knee pads. And the person next to him working said, we don't need knee pads. We need a packing table. And he was like, that's the most brilliant thing I've heard. And instead of getting a table, he went to, a home improvement store, realized he could buy a solid core door, 4 4x4s and some brackets, and make a table for significantly less than he could buy a table for.
Right.
And so it's called the door desk. He used the door desk as his desk in his office. He still has one today. And that's a culture symbol at Amazon for being frugal. That is one of their core principles, right?
Yes.
So that's a culture. So you influence culture and try and direct it.
Yep.
And that's what he's done. And I believe actually these letters were a significant audience for his shareholder letters were not investors.
Right.
But employees. It was one of the tools he used to keep in front of them what he felt were important key components or pieces to the Amazon culture.
Okay. Interesting. So as we're wrapping up here then, what are 3 action items someone who's listening to this podcast, if you were to recommend just 3 things they could take from the Amazon story, your book, The Bezos Letters, what would those 3 takeaways be?
I think one would be seeking in your business to determine how to remove friction from your customers.
Okay.
And by the way, for contractors, that could be, how do I have a better relationship with my subs?
Yeah.
Right?
Beautiful.
because historically, right, that's always kind of a tension relationship, but subs are so important because, certainly what I'm seeing here in Nashville where I am, it's hard finding people to get construction things done. But if I have built a relationship and treated them well, guess what? I may be at the top end of the list of help or people that I want to work with, right?
Yes.
So friction, whatever that might look like for you, right? I think the flywheel, I have to say, is spend some time looking at that.
Yeah.
Of the 14 principles, if pushed, I would say it's probably the most important.
Okay.
But also probably the hardest to implement.
Okay.
And Jim Collins in 2019 actually wrote a monograph, a short, I think it's about 50-page long book, just on the flywheel and what he's learned about implementing the flywheel in the years since the book Good to Great came out. Very interesting reading. And he gives examples from non-business. He gives the example of an elementary school principal who figured out the flywheel with the goal of increasing her students' test scores.
Yeah.
So it's not just, business, but what are those cores, and spending some time really thinking about that.
Excellent.
I have to end with believe it's always day one, because I do think that is another, core principle of staying focused. Here's how I phrase it, Eric. The biggest risk a successful business faces is their success.
Yes, it is.
You look at BlackBerry, you look at Blockbuster, you look at Kodak, you look at, all kinds of different companies, Sears, that are no longer here, but at one time were successful, and they spent their energy protecting their success.
Yes.
Not experimenting and figuring out what's next.
Yes. And that's where that number 3 comes in, the eager adoption of external trends.
Correct. Yep.
And excellent. Steve, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Tell us a little bit more about where we can get you and where we can find you and your book.
So the book's available certainly on Amazon and selected bookstores.
You didn't get banned by Amazon, huh?
No, I didn't get banned by Amazon. If you get the book wherever your favorite, retailer is, it's available. And then go to the book website, which is thebezosletters.com. And there's some additional material there, a workbook to help you work through the principles, ask some questions, allow you to kind of think through how they might apply in your own organization.
Excellent. Steve, very, very generous of you to spend time with us. All those links will be in the show notes. I think I'll link to the Jim Collins monograph as well, but we'll do the Bezos letters and your book as well directly on Amazon.
That'd be great, Eric. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Appreciate your time. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.